You know, when you see someone you love start to forget things, maybe a recent chat or they struggle with a task they've done 1,000 times, it's really natural to worry. It's a feeling a lot of us can relate to. So let's get into it. The goal here is simple, to give you clear, straight-up facts to help you understand what might be going on. And this right here is the big question. This is the one that brings so many families searching for answers. Figuring out the difference, well, that's the first and honestly, the most critical step toward getting the right kind of help and support.
Okay, so let's break down that difference. We all get a little forgetful as we get older, right? You might misplace your keys from time to time, but Alzheimer's, that's a whole different ballgame. It's a progressive disease that actually physically changes the brain. So it's not just about memory. It affects thinking, behavior, and eventually even the simplest daily routines.
Now, to really get a handle on Alzheimer's, we have to clear something up first. It's probably the most common point of confusion out there, how it relates to the word dementia.
Think of it this way. Dementia isn't one specific disease. It's more of an umbrella term for a bunch of symptoms, kind of like how a fever or a cough are symptoms, not the illness itself. Dementia tells you what's happening, memory loss, confusion, but it doesn't tell you why. Alzheimer's, on the other hand, is one of the diseases that causes those symptoms.
And this chart really puts it into perspective. Alzheimer's isn't just one cause of dementia. It is, by far, the most common cause. We're talking 60 to 80% of all cases, so it's the main reason behind the symptoms we're talking about.
And just to really drive home how serious this is, Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. So, you see, this is so much more than just losing your memory. It's a fatal disease. And that's why understanding it is just so incredibly important. So we've got the terms down. Now let's get into the science. What is physically happening inside the brain of someone with Alzheimer's? I mean, what is this disease actually doing to our most complex organ? All right, so the first troublemaker is something called amyloid plaques. Just imagine these sticky clumps of protein that start building up in the spaces between your brain's nerve cells. They're like little roadblocks, gumming up the works and disrupting the communication pathways that are absolutely essential for thinking and memory. And then you've got the accomplice in all this, tau tangles. These are twisted fibers of another protein, but they build up inside the nerve cells. So if the plaques are blocking the roads outside the cells, the tangles are destroying the network from within, causing the cells themselves to just break down and die.
You know, what's fascinating here is how the disease follows a path. It doesn't just hit the whole brain at once. The damage usually kicks off in the part of the brain that handles memory. Then, as more and more neurons die, that damage starts to spread. And over time, the brain itself actually physically shrinks. This whole progression is exactly why the symptoms start out mild and get worse over time.
Okay, so that's the science. But what does all of this actually look like in a person? Let's talk about the human side of it, the symptoms that families and loved ones see every day. So here it is. The first big red flag for most people is trouble remembering new stuff. And that makes perfect sense, right? Because as we just saw, the disease starts its attack in the brain's memory-making center. Forgetting where you put your keys is one thing, but forgetting a conversation you had just this morning, that's different.
And this gives you a really clear side-by-side of how those symptoms evolve. Early on, it might just be trouble finding the right word or some questionable judgment. But as the disease moves forward, you see more severe memory loss, confusion, and eventually it can affect the ability to do basic things like getting dressed or bathing.
And it's just so much more than memory. This disease can really change a person's personality, causing mood swings, anxiety, and frustration. It can affect physical abilities, making walking difficult. It can cause confusion and disorientation, making even familiar places feel new and strange. It's a whole brain disease, and it really does affect the whole person.
So all of this brings us to the really big practical questions that everybody has. Why does this happen, and what, if anything, can we do about it? Let's dive into what we know right now.
Well, the honest answer is, for most people, we still don't know the exact cause. With early onset Alzheimer's, which is pretty rare, there's a strong genetic link. But for the much more common late onset kind, it really seems to be a complex cocktail of genetics, lifestyle, and environment that's been brewing for decades. And that leads to the toughest question of all. Is there a cure? And the answer, for right now, is no. That's a really hard thing to hear, but it's important to be clear about it.
But that no doesn't mean there's no hope. Not at all. While we don't have a cure yet, we do have treatments. The whole focus is on managing the symptoms. In fact, there are several FDA-approved drugs out there that can help stabilize or reduce symptoms like memory loss and confusion, and that can make a real difference in the quality of life for everyone involved.
So what about life expectancy? Well, the data shows us an average. On average, a person with Alzheimer's lives for about 8 years after their symptoms become noticeable to other people.
But, and this is a really big but, an average is just that, an average. The reality is, survival can be anywhere from 4 years to even 20 years. It really depends on the person's age at diagnosis and their overall health. Every single journey with this disease is unique.
And that brings us right back to where we started. Understanding what Alzheimer's is, how it works, what to look for, that's the first step. It's like the source material says. Getting the facts is your most potent tool. Knowledge gives you the power to ask the right questions, find the right help, and be the best caregiver you can be.
So, we'll leave you with this to think about. Knowing the science is one thing, but the next step, that's on all of us. How can we take this knowledge and use it to build better, more understanding, and more supportive communities for the millions of families who are living this reality every single day?